All right, Maria, am I good to go?
Yep.
Fantastic. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to Supercompute 21. I am Shreya Shah, and I lead the portfolio planning for Accelerator Technologies on PowerEdge servers. I'm excited to be here with you to walk you through a session that's really focused on AI. It's about getting a performance boost with the latest servers using accelerators. Now, over the last 5 years, I have, been involved in this AI and HPC space. And since 2017, have seen a notable shift in the adoption of AI. The Dell EMC PowerEdge line of servers has evolved and morphed, right, to focus and deliver performance for AI applications. And what I'll do today is walk you through this portfolio and focus on some of the very new and exciting additions we've made to the portfolio. Now, AI has really been around since the 1950s. So, why is it just recently that the idea of AI has exploded? It kind of turns out that there are three factors really fueling the growth of AI. The first is the availability of data. So, the amount of data being generated through sensors, so be it video, text, speech, it's really growing at a phenomenal rate, expected to reach about 200 zettabytes by 2025. So that's pretty large there. So this massive data is really needed to, for example, train neural nets that are used in deep learning to solve these AI problems. The second factor is the availability of libraries, frameworks, and models. So once you have this massive amounts of data, you must be able to work with them. So you may have heard of TensorFlow from Google or Cafe from Berkeley Research. These are some of the many open source frameworks that are now readily available to choose from, depending on your application and workloads. The third factor, which you see there, is the ability to process this massive amount of data in a very reasonable time frame. Turns out that accelerators like GPUs, for example, are great at matrix multiplications. And with the ability to pool these GPUs in a single node, we can now do with a couple of servers what previously took an entire data center to compute. With FPGAs, for example, you get the benefit of low latency that is beneficial for inferencing type of applications. So, at the end of the day, it really comes down to infrastructure innovations or the idea of massive compute at an affordable rate in a dense space that is making all this possible. So clearly, a lot of excitement around AI. However, while over 90% of applications are expected to use AI techniques in the next 5 years, really less than 15% of organizations are actively and currently deploying these AI capabilities. Well, why is this, right? It turns out that AI is not easy. Now, in order to get your AI ecosystem right, you have to get your infrastructure right. You have to get the OS right. You have to choose the right libraries and frameworks. A lot of rights, and it all starts with a solid backbone, which is the infrastructure, which is maximized for that performance we just talked about and minimized for the latency. And so, this is where Dell EMC PowerEdge really makes it easy for you. Depending on where you are in your journey from an acceleration perspective, we have a range of options in our PowerEdge server portfolio. Um, and, the portfolio, as you can see, kind of spans the edge with the XE2420 and XR12. What you see on the left of your screen, which can support acceleration in harsh environments. In the core data center, you can start your AI journey with our two socket Intel and AMD platforms, which are the R750 and the R7525 with built in acceleration capabilities. I'll come back to that middle heavy workloads training column in just a bit. On the right of the screen, what you'll see is high performance graphics and database analytics, and that's where DSS 8440 and R940XA are a great fit. And then, of course, as you think about cloud and disaggregation, our MX line is perfect for this purpose. So coming back to the infrastructure where, heavy workloads like deep learning and machine learning training are of interest, we have architected two brand new platforms. And this is the PowerEdge Xe8545 and the PowerEdge R750XA. And this is what we consider the future of AI infrastructure from Dell Technologies. These platforms are purpose built and focused to deliver that maximum performance we talked about and that minimum latency that is very important in depending on your application. So let me kind of give you a glimpse into how we came up with the design of Xe8545. So the journey actually started a few years ago with its predecessor, which is the PowerEdge C4140 platform. If you think about the way the data flows, it comes in through your I/O port, routed through your CPU, and then down into the GPUs. Now, depending on your application, you can experience bottlenecks and latency hits at many points in this path. To maximize the throughput, each GPU was actually allowed dedicated by 16 PCIe connections to the CPU. But more importantly, um, to minimize the latency, the GPU to CPU connection was done so without the introduction of any PLX or PCIe switches, which are actually quite widely used in the industry and introduce that latency that we just talked about. And so, that direct connection that we talked about between CPU and GPUs, plus the NVLink connectivity from NVIDIA, between the GPUs allowed us to maximize that performance and minimize the latency. In fact, this unique architecture was so successful that it is now being standardized and widely adopted in the industry. This architecture has also been continued in this newly launched product, the Xe8545 that I just mentioned. I'll get into the details in just a second, okay? Okay, and speaking of the details, here they are. So again, Xe8545 is a purpose-built server focused on deep learning training and HPC workloads. It is based on the latest AMD EPYC processors with up to 64 cores, each directly connected to the four A100 SXM4 NVLink GPUs that we talked about previously, which can be air-cooled up to 500 watts per GPU. And so this is a pretty interesting TDP point from a GPU perspective, and 500 watts obviously is no joke there. The NVLink capability, again, as I mentioned, allows for the direct GPU to GPU communication, thereby speeding up the training times. Okay. Now, the other platform that I showed earlier was the R750XA. And that is Dell's mainstream server that can support a variety of workloads such as machine learning training and inferencing. On top of that, we have workloads such as VDI and HPC specific workloads that can be all done on this R750XA. This platform is based on the latest Intel Xeon scalable processors with either 4 double-wide or 6 single-wide PCIe GPUs available from both NVIDIA and AMD. Now, with accelerators such as A100 from NVIDIA as an example, or even MI100 from AMD's Instinct line, so these are just to name a few. There are plenty of options to choose from depending on your workload needs. Now, we know that implementing AI is not easy. And we want you to be successful in your journey. So if you're ready to talk to us about your AI needs, please reach out to us and we would love to help you. Thank you so much for your time today. Does anyone have questions?
I have one question. Regarding the XC8545, do you guys also support some of these latest accelerator coming from like companies like Simbanova, I don't know, Habanero, things like that, or it's dedicated to A100 as well as the Instinct line from AMD?
Yeah, so great question. So the Xe8545 is actually dedicated to the A100 architecture from NVIDIA, but the R750XA that we just talked about as well has, supports a variety of GPUs, AMD MI100 being one of those. So a lot more options on the 750XA, but Xe8545 really, really dedicated for those training type of workloads.
Okay, and is this R750XA, is it air-cooled or is it just for the liquid cooling?
Yeah, they're both air cooled, and so Xe8545 can air cool up to 500 watts per GPU, and the R750XA, air cools the PCIe form factor type of GPUs.
I see. Thank you.
Great questions.
Hey, I had a
Okay.
question about IPUs. Do we carry IPUs?
Yeah, so DSS 8440, we enabled the graph core capability for deep learning training, for example, was one of those, Janet. And we continue to explore IPUs from a host of other of our technology partners. So expect to see some interesting things coming in the future.
Thank you. And then I don't know if you already covered inferencing. It looks like the focus was really on the heavy training part. What are the options for inferencing?
Yeah, so on the left of your screen, Janet, you see XR12 and XE2420. Those are platforms that we really focus on from an edge perspective. Obviously, a lot of the workloads on the edge are inferencing focused, and so as we think about performance, we really do pay attention to that. And depending on where you're doing inferencing, could be in the edge, could be in the core, could be in the cloud. We have options across any of those places where you want to do inferencing. So in the core, obviously our R750, R7525 have options, built-in acceleration capabilities to do inferencing specifically as well. And then you've got the R750XA, which is really for those workloads that are pushing the limits of acceleration focused workloads.
Now, I heard last week at NVIDIA GTC that NVIDIA announced a bunch of new GPUs, or maybe it wasn't a bunch, but wanted to find out, like, what's the spectrum of accelerators that we carry or cover?
Yeah, we have a wide range, Janet, from NVIDIA, right? We talked about A100, but we also have the A40, which is really good for performance graphics for collaborative type of applications. As an example, there was one that was announced at GTC, and Dell plans on supporting that in the portfolio as well. We also have the A16 that was just recently announced in the Dell portfolio. So a variety of different options there to choose from. And then of course with AMD uh, in their journey of acceleration through their Instinct line, we're very happy to partner with them as well to bring the latest and greatest from an acceleration perspective.
Do I get to mix and match them in the same box?
No, unfortunately, that's not something that we recommend, but you can certainly have multiple nodes that are dedicated to certain GPUs. And so, the goal is to be able to support heterogeneous environments. And really, it doesn't come down to hardware, but really, can your software ecosystem support it?
Thank you.
Sure. Great questions, Janet.
I have maybe a comment. There was I think if you go to the slide on R750XA,
Sure.
or I don't know, 8545, PCIe, I think there might be a typo there. Gen 13. it might be Gen 3 or 4 you wanted to put there. Just wanted to mention 8545 actually, if you go to that one. Oh, I think it was the one that you had the architecture between GPU and CPU. And, yeah, this one.
Good catch. Yes, that was
Yeah.
Gen 3. Yes, that's
Yeah.
really awesome. Thank you, Sherman. We'll get that corrected.
I don't know. I'm waiting for Gen 13. I want to know what that's going to look like because let me tell you, sometimes I feel like it just can't go fast enough.
Yeah, so C4140 was the predecessor of Xe8545, and so that's Gen 3 PCIe technology. Obviously, in this time frame, Sherwin, as you probably know, we're in Gen 4 technology, and that's what Xe8545 and R750XA and pretty much across the board, the platforms that we discussed are supporting.
Yeah, I don't know if we have time, since we are talking about it. That's the one that DSS 8440. Is this the one that can support all the way to 10 GPU cards, A100?
Yep.
Okay.
Got it.
Yeah, but 16 half width are the smaller cards.
I see. And is it that's a for you, right?
That is a for you. That's correct.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Sherwin, you seem to be pretty familiar with the portfolio. Maybe you can share a couple of things that you're looking at on your side that will give us some good insights into how you think about the portfolio.
Uh, sure. So I'm with the university, and we are heavily involved with like different partners, Dell, HP, others. And so the one thing that I didn't see from Dell is the that DSS 8440 maybe. That's something that we are really interested, but I didn't know so far that actually exists. And it's just heavy workload with AI and more than 4 A100, so up to 8. And I don't know if you guys actually sell that one or that's only for like cloud but that was something that we were looking for, and at the time Dell didn't have the option to sell it. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it is widely available at this point, and it's not just for cloud. But maybe we can take this conversation offline. Be happy to walk you through the details of DSS 8440, and depending on what you're doing, right, make sure that you have the right platform in hand. So happy to have that conversation.
Sure.
I'm a big fan of the DSS 8440 because it keeps winning all the benchmarks. For example, in MLPerf for inferencing, it actually won a whole bunch of the top categories. So, and then the front airflow. Shreya, can you talk a little bit about how they designed it for the airflow? I mean, one of the things that I keep looking at is, when you want to put that many GPUs into a server chassis, you got to think about the heat.
Yeah, you nailed it, Janet. And so, as we talk about supporting, in Gen -2, we were looking at between 250 to 300 watts, and in this generation, we look at between 250 and 500 watts, right? That the TDPs are growing very, very quickly. And so as we think about performance, we really do make sure that wherever possible we're allowing the GPUs to get the cooler air from the front, right? Now it doesn't always work out that way, but we make sure, for example, in the Xe8545, that there is ability to support GPUs all the way up to 500 TDPs. But more importantly, it's not just the average power, but also the peak power that needs to be supported. And so we really make sure that as we're architecting these platforms, we're paying attention to performance, and that we don't end up in a condition where throttling is a place that you end up with when you're really taxing the system.
Thanks. In the front of the DSS8440, those are all the fans. I thought it was neat that, for example, in the design, they put the airflow up front. In other words, so that again, you've got airflow flowing over those 10 A100 GPUs like the entire time. So you've got airflow from front to back.
Exactly, Janet. That's correct.
Just geeking out, you know?
I love it. Awesome. Any other questions? Fantastic. Well, hopefully this was helpful. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks for coming.